Hi, and welcome to Mind Design, my weekly short video series where I offer stories or personal challenges in hopes that it inspires you to embrace more of your own potential. I do this because as a coach, I'm constantly challenging my clients to step out of their own comfort zone, to do something that seems slightly out of reach or makes them uncomfortable. Because when we do that, when we push ourselves, that's where the growth lies. This week, I want to talk a little bit about people pleasing and what that can look like in your life and why it can be so destructive. You know, I used to have no opinion. My husband would say, "Where would you like to eat?" My reply would be almost, "Oh, wherever, it's fine with me." Or if someone asked me to do something, my answer would always be yes, because I obviously wanted to make them happy. When you're a people pleaser, it can be challenging to understand how to break this pattern of behavior. But the first step is always to recognize the signs. You know, seeking approval is common for all of us. It's one of those inherent human traits. We want to fit in. Historically, we were part of our tribe, and our ability to fit in ensured our survival. So now we seek approval from our peers, our social groups, and our family. But people pleasing is a more severe form of approval seeking behavior that becomes part of the person's personality, part of their identity, and disrupts their concepts around, their own value, their worth, and their self-esteem. As children, we may seek approval from parents, and we learn about expectations, how to behave, how to get attention, and how to avoid pain. Approval seeking at this stage is normal and expected, and it's a strategy that's learned in order to survive or maneuver our way through life. Approval seeking can become one of an individual's predominant strategies for human reaction. If that sort of behavior is strongly reinforced by rewards or punishments from, parents, people important to us, peers, society, then that's perceived as the best way for us to manage or deal with the external world. A person may integrate this belief into the core of their thought processes as habitual, routine, autopilot behavior, becoming what's known as a people pleaser, even though this does boil down to a habit, right? It's something that we've taken on as the best way to behave or make choices. It still boils down to a habit. So the good news is it can be broken. And although the behavior served them, as they're an infant in their childhood, in their growth stages, at some point, it doesn't, really serve them as an adult. So what does people pleasing look like? People pleasers will offer themselves, their time, gifts, attention, often to the detriment of themselves. And this is because they value other people more than themselves. People pleasers won't speak their mind or stand up for themselves. They avoid confrontation at all costs. And this resonates with me because for years, and I want to say I'm past this. And I'm still working. I'm still a work in progress. We will assume that our own opinion is not worth hearing. We'll nod our heads, right? In agreement, emphatic agreement, regardless of what the person who's speaking has said. And we laugh at things that are said, even if they're not funny to us. And we don't challenge those things that are offensive to us. Those statements that that cross the boundaries that we've created in our own lives. We don't challenge those statements. So what's the reality for a people pleaser? We say yes to every request. I have to say I'm not doing that anymore. However, we have an inherent inability to say no. It's a problem for us to say no. We wonder how the other person will perceive us. We want to fit in and be liked, even if that means mimicking or talking about others. And we avoid authenticity because we don't like to be vulnerable. People pleasers often apologize and blame themselves when things go wrong, and they overthink. They think about past mistakes they've made. They ruminate over the past, and they worry about the future and what's going to happen, the things that aren't within their control or how they can control things. And they're almost totally dependent on external validation. This is not me at this point in my life. It's at this point in my life, I can say that there is intrinsic validation that's happening. But I remember a time when I was so hung up on what other people thought of me, how they validated me, how they thought of me, with what kind of esteem that they thought of me. And we take on too much responsibility. We take on responsibility for other people's emotions and how they're feeling and their volatility or emotional regulation. So then I guess at this point, we need to kind of understand, why do people become pleasers? We want to feel good about ourselves, and we're not in touch maybe with what makes us a good person or a worthwhile person. So we look to others for validation. We believe that, we can mold ourselves into something that other people will like. And the reality is that this messaging is tied into, the messaging we received as children. Who did we need to be? How did we receive affection, praise? What did that look like? So, when you are a people pleaser, at some point, it no longer serves you. It no longer is something that really allows you to move through life with ease. You develop these strategies based on your history. You develop these strategies or ways of being to navigate life, right? And it becomes a habit, and that's just how, but at some point, the habit no longer serves you, right? At some point, the habits are actually in the way of what it is that you want to achieve. So I guess we can talk about what's the cost of people pleasing. There's a tremendous amount of burnout. You're busy doing and giving for everyone else, even though it's not easy or convenient, and you don't refuel. So you burn out. There's a tremendous amount of relationship stress. People pleasers neglect their relationships, whether it's their partnerships or close relationships, in order to fulfill the stuff that they've said yes to. It can lead to passive aggressive behavior and frustration, because they wonder why people don't understand that they're falling apart, or they don't recognize that they're falling apart. And they can feel resentment. When they're doing nice things for others, they're annoyed because no one notices how much they're doing or how exhausted they are. When you're the one that in the relationship that's constantly saying, yes, I don't care, wherever you want to go for dinner, right? At some point, that resentment brews. Like, my perspective or my point of view is never on the table. It's never validated. It's never part of the equation. That's not your partner's fault, for the most part. It's not your partner's fault. It's yours for not expressing it, for defaulting to that way of being, that mode of being where you say, no, it's okay, whatever you want. And being a people pleaser gives you a diminished sense of enjoyment. So you really don't have as much joy in your life, in anything you do, the people you spend time with, or the things that you're doing. Because when you're pleasing other people, you're not connected to who you are. You're not connected to what you want, how you feel. So you're not fully present because you're constantly trying to be something for someone else. So, when you're burnt out and you're struggling in your relationship and there's not that sense of joy, there's stress. There's, this mindset leads to a high amount of chronic stress because you're trying to keep everyone happy by doing so many things for so many people. It is draining mentally, emotionally, and physically, and it takes a huge toll on your mood and behavior. And the ultimate price that you pay as a people pleaser is your confidence. We are totally dependent on external validation. We constantly seek approval to our own detriment. We have no sense of validating ourselves because at the bottom line, our self-esteem is really, really damaged. So there's the danger in this, right? We as people pleasers have such a low opinion of ourselves that the needs and wants and desires and opinions of other people take precedence over everything in our lives, right? And you feel like you don't have any control because you're giving it away all the time. So then you try to control everything else, right? You try to control the people around you. You want to be, wanting to be like is just a symptom of the desire to be in control because deep down you feel powerless or worthless. That's why people pleasing is so exhausting. It goes against, the flow of life, and it takes so much energy to maintain. You really, as a people pleaser, need other people to like you. You worry about rejection. And when you worry about rejection, you will do things specifically so people don't reject you. And as a people pleaser, there's just a tremendous pressure to maintain the appearance that you've orchestrated, right? This mask that you're wearing, the person that you've become, saying yes all the time, being nice all the time, it's really exhausting to maintain that self-image. You're constantly trying to be on someone's good side. And it's chronically stressful for you to try and maintain that. Keeping that mask on all the time, even though it might be suffocating you. As people pleasers, we've already been through, we have a hard time saying no. We worry about the ramifications of when we say no. Will the person like us? Will they accept us? Will they still be pleased by us or affectionate to us? And it's a bigger issue because our need for others to like us supersedes the need for us to like ourselves. And so inevitably, this needing to be wanted and loved and needed by others results in, suppressing tons of emotions. Like, I'm not talking crying, I'm talking about rage, hatred, bitterness, annoyance, grief, stress, anything that is contrary to the altruistic image that you've cultivated. You can't give yourself to other people, deny yourself, and expect to feel okay long term. This suppression of your emotions eventually results in, physical or psychological breakdowns. You apologize or accept fault when you aren't to blame. You're always ready to say sorry, which as a Canadian is kind of inherent. But people pleasing behaviors, we're so, it's involved with the readiness to take on blame, even when what's happened has nothing to do with us. And we're quick to agree, even if we don't agree. We give and give and give until we don't have any free time. So people, because we give all the time, people use us. But the bottom line is that nobody really knows who we are as people pleasers, because we're so tied up in this persona that we've orchestrated. Who do we need to say yes to? How many times do we need to say yes? How can I avoid saying no? How can I avoid having an opinion? Who do I need to agree with, laugh with, to continue wearing the mask that I've created? And when no one knows you, you feel that. You feel that people use you. You feel that they have no idea who you are. So, eventually when you start to see these patterns of behavior and habits of behavior, but patterns of behavior reinforced over years and years and years, eventually when you see this and it's problematic and it's not in alignment with who you want to be, right? So maybe it works for you. Maybe that's just, I do it and it's okay. It's not really creating havoc in my life. But if something feels off, if you feel frustrated and angry because this is what you've created, at some point you're going to want to get really real with, how do I break this pattern? How do I stop doing this? How do I change? How do I create something different, right? So to break out of the people-pleasing trap, it only happens when you decide it's time to change. When you see that this is what you're doing and you actually decide that that's not how you want to operate in this life anymore. That's not the path you want to take anymore. The first thing, you've got to examine the fear. It's people-pleasing, as most of these behaviors that we seek to change are rooted in fear. People-pleasing is the same. So figure out where that fear comes from. How did you need to behave as a child? And what would be the repercussions if you did not? And that could be as simple as I needed to agree with my dad so that I was included in the conversation, right? It's very, very subtle, the programming that happens as children. And that's not to say our parents are bad people. Our parents did the best that they could with the tools that they had. And it's up to us now to take responsibility for this, the things that are not working, and create the change that makes us happy, right? We were given life by our parents. It's a gift, right? We were also given other things by our parents. It's up to us to change that dynamic, to change how we feel about ourselves, to notice the patterns of behavior that are no longer serving us and change those. So examine the fear. Journal around where the fear comes from. Try to understand it. If your friend, was struggling and told you this story, what would you tell them? Don't be afraid to explore into your childhood, because for most of us, things are deeply rooted back there. That's when the programming happens. So you can't understand what's going on now if you don't go there. So Practice being really self-aware. Notice what triggers you to, or what triggers you to become more of a people pleaser? What instigates that behavior? When do you act like a people pleaser? When do you ignore yourself? When do you put yourself aside in order to gain approval from other people? Don't judge yourself or deny that it's happening. It's not helping. Self-judgment is never conducive to personal growth. You got to let that go. Be compassionate. You're on a journey. It's your path, and you get to choose. You get to decide. So I'm a huge advocate for journaling, specifically journaling around ideas of self-esteem and worth can create new awareness when it comes to understanding people pleasing. Create a list of your values, like what makes me valuable? What do I value? Create a list of your opinions. What do I think? What's important to me? And when it comes to your relationship, realize that doing too much or saying yes too often or having no opinion, it hurts rather than helps. The health of any relationship depends on the willingness of each individual to care for themselves first and then give to that relationship. When you overfunction in your relationship, it inevitably leads to underfunction on the other person's part, and it creates a skewed relationship and feelings of being taken for granted. Ultimately, these feelings will breed resentment and anger fuels impulsive, reckless, and reactive behavior. Part of this whole puzzle is authenticity, because the more we strive for authenticity, the less these self-sabotage, people-pleasing, other kinds of behavior are going to fall in line with who we really want to be in our lives. So understanding the importance of being authentic. Authenticity not only allows you to express your real self and all of your emotions, but also allows others to see you for who you really are. To sit in the space of authenticity means that you accept yourself, the good and the bad, the light and the dark, negative and positive, right? Accepting ourselves doesn't mean I'm never going to change, right? It means I'm okay with who I am. And I'll take me as I am. I'll work to change the things that I don't like or that I want to change. But I'm in love with the person I am right now. And if you're stuck in the past for things that you feel have happened to you, that's not your fault. You're not to blame for that, but it is your responsibility to move forward. And so forgiving the people in your lives that you feel have wronged you is mandatory for personal development on every platform. You must forgive or you'll be imprisoned by the experiences of your past. And this is about having the experience, getting a lesson, leaving the experience back there and taking the lesson forward, right? Forgive who you need to forgive. Free yourself. Free yourself from the hold it has over you and let go of being the victim or being defined by that story. You need to face the things in your life that are not working for you so that you can really, move forward into something different. Manage your stress and anxiety, practice self-acceptance, learn, take the lessons again, work on your priorities and set your boundaries, understanding what you want and what is important to you, and then setting boundaries or rules of engagement for people around you is really important in a feeling of fostering that foundational, I am of importance in this life. The pattern of people pleasing can be difficult to break, but rooting yourself in self-acceptance and authenticity will ultimately serve you in moving forward. That's it for this week. I hope I've inspired you to do something differently in your life, to make small changes that create big impact. After all, you only have one life.